Have you ever wondered how someone can lose everything, only to discover they were never truly alone, pregnant and homeless? Sophia Bennett believed her life was over. Her husband had abandoned her. She had lost her job, and an eviction notice left her with nowhere to go. Then one unexpected phone call changed everything. A lawyer informed her that she had inherited an old mansion from a relative she'd never known. It sounded like a miracle until she stepped inside. Hidden behind those aging walls was a family secret buried for nearly 60 years, one that would change her life forever. The old mansion stood at the end of a forgotten country road, swallowed by weeds, silence, and years of secrets no one in town dared to speak about. Sophia Bennett sat in the back of a taxi, one hand pressed gently against her pregnant belly, the other clutching a wrinkled letter from an attorney she had never met. Just 24 hours earlier, she had been standing on a sidewalk with 2 suitcases, no home, no job, and no one willing to answer her calls. 3 months pregnant, abandoned, evicted, and now, somehow, she had inherited Blackwood Manor from a woman whose name she had never heard before. As the taxi rolled to a stop, Sophia looked up at the towering Victorian house. Its windows were dark, like watchful eyes. The front porch sagged under the weight of time. The air felt strangely cold, even though it was late summer. The driver glanced at her in the mirror. "Ma'am, are you sure this is where you're supposed to be?" Sophia swallowed hard. "No," she whispered. "But it's the only place I have left." She stepped out, dragging her suitcases across the cracked stone path. Then, just as she reached the front door, something moved behind an upstairs curtain. Sophia froze, because someone or something was already inside. 3 months earlier, Sophia Bennett sat motionless on the edge of her bed, staring at the pregnancy test resting in her trembling hands. 2 pink lines, 2 tiny lines that changed everything. Outside, rain hammered against the apartment windows, turning the gray afternoon even darker. Inside, the silence was suffocating. At 37 years old, this wasn't how she had imagined becoming a mother. "Sophia," Daniel called from the living room. "You've been in there for 20 minutes. She quickly slipped the test into the pocket of her sweatshirt and splashed cold water on her face. Her reflection looked exhausted. Dark circles framed her hazel eyes, and the smile she once wore so effortlessly had disappeared months ago. "I'm coming," she answered, forcing confidence into a voice that barely held together. When she stepped into the bedroom, her heart stopped. Daniel's suitcase lay open across the bed. Half of his clothes were already folded inside. She stared at him. "You're really leaving?" It wasn't a question. Daniel sighed without looking up. "We've already talked about this, Sophia." "No," she replied quietly. "You've talked. I've listened." He zipped another travel bag and finally met her eyes. "This job in Chicago is my chance to start over." "Start over," she repeated. "Without me." He looked away. "I think we've both known for a while that this marriage hasn't been working." Sophia felt her fingers close around the pregnancy test hidden in her pocket. Only minutes ago she had imagined a completely different conversation. She had pictured Daniel smiling through tears, holding her, talking about baby names, dreaming about a nursery. Instead, she was watching the man she loved erase 12 years together, one shirt at a time. Her throat tightened. "I have something I need to tell you." Daniel paused. "What is it?" The words reached her lips. "I'm pregnant." But when she looked into his eyes, they were already somewhere else. There was no excitement, no hope, only impatience. The sentence died before it was ever spoken. She slowly shook her head. "Oh, it's nothing." Daniel nodded, almost relieved. I think that's for the best." The apartment door closed behind him a few minutes later. The sound echoed through every empty room. Sophia stood frozen long after the elevator carried him away. Then, without warning, her legs gave out beneath her. She slid onto the floor, wrapped both arms around herself, and finally allowed the tears to come. One hand instinctively rested on her stomach. "I don't know how," she whispered. "But I promise. I'll protect you." 3 weeks later, life dealt another devastating blow. The publishing company where Sophia had worked for nearly 15 years filed for bankruptcy overnight. There were no farewell speeches, no generous severance packages, just cardboard boxes, security guards, and hundreds of stunned employees walking out the front doors carrying what remained of their careers. Sophia spent the next several weeks sending resume after resume. Every morning began with hope. Every evening ended with another rejection email. Her savings disappeared faster than she could slow them down. Medical bills piled higher. Rent became impossible. Then came the knock she had dreaded. Her landlord, Mr. Collins, stood quietly outside her apartment. His expression said everything before he spoke. "I'm so sorry, Sophia." She nodded. "I know." "I fought to give you more time." "I know. But the property management company won't wait any longer." He handed her the eviction notice. Sophia stared at the paper until the words blurred together. She had exactly 1 week. 1 week before she and her unborn baby would have nowhere to go. By Friday, almost everything she owned had been sold. The dining table where she and Daniel celebrated anniversaries. The bookshelf her father had built. Even the silver necklace her grandmother had left her before she passed away. Every item carried a memory. Every memory now helped pay another bill. On her final night in the apartment, she slept on a thin blanket spread across the hardwood floor. Around her sat 2 worn suitcases. 12 years of marriage. Reduced to luggage. Sometime after midnight, she felt the faintest flutter inside her belly. She smiled through her tears. "Hi there," she whispered. "I guess it's just you and me now." For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel completely alone. The next morning, movers changed the apartment locks while Sophia stood on the sidewalk holding everything she had left. She had no destination, no family to call, no backup plan, only uncertainty. Then her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. "May I speak with Miss Sophia Bennett?" "This is she." "My name is Lawrence Whitmore from Whitmore and Associates." His calm voice carried unexpected urgency. "I've been trying to locate you for nearly 3 months." Sophia frowned. "There must be some mistake." "I'm calling regarding the estate of your great-aunt, Margaret Ashford." Silence. "I don't have a great-aunt." "You do, Miss Bennett?" Another brief pause. "And according to her final will, you are her only surviving heir." Sophia slowly lowered herself onto one of her suitcases. "I don't understand." "You will." The attorney's voice softened. "Because beginning today, Blackwood Manor belongs to you." At that moment, Sophia believed she had been handed a second chance. She had no idea that opening the doors of Blackwood Manor would also unlock decades of buried secrets and place her directly in the path of people willing to do anything to keep the truth hidden. The taxi disappeared down the winding road, leaving Sophia Bennett standing alone in front of Blackwood Manor. For a long moment, she couldn't move. The mansion towered over her like a forgotten monument, its weathered brick walls scarred by time and neglect. Ivy had swallowed much of the exterior, while towering oak trees cast long shadows across the cracked stone walkway. Every broken window and faded shutter whispered the same unsettling message. No one has truly lived here for years. Sophia tightened her grip on the attorney's envelope. "This is home now," she whispered, though the words felt foreign. The heavy iron key resisted at first, before finally turning with a deep, metallic groan. The massive oak door slowly swung inward. A wave of stale air rolled over her. Dust floated through narrow beams of fading sunlight, illuminating furniture hidden beneath white sheets, like silent ghosts frozen in time. "Hello." Her voice echoed through the enormous foyer. No answer, only silence. She stepped cautiously across the marble floor, her footsteps disturbing years of untouched dust. Every creak of the wooden staircase made her heart race. Despite the neglect, the house was breathtaking. Hand-carved banisters, crystal chandeliers draped in cobwebs, portraits of unfamiliar faces staring down from the walls. It felt less like an abandoned house, and more like someone had simply walked away one day and never returned. Sophia wandered through room after room, trying to imagine the lives once lived inside these walls. A formal dining room large enough to host dozens. A grand library lined with hundreds of leather-bound books. A music room where an old piano still waited beneath a layer of dust. Who had these people been? And why had everything been left exactly as it was? As she climbed to the second floor, exhaustion began to settle over her. She chose the largest bedroom overlooking the front gardens and carefully lowered herself onto the edge of the antique bed. "I guess this is where we'll start over," she said softly, placing both hands on her growing belly. The baby responded with a tiny flutter. For the first time in weeks, Sophia smiled. Then, clang! The deafening sound echoed from somewhere downstairs. Sophia froze. Every muscle in her body tightened. Someone was inside the house. She slowly stood, her pulse pounding so loudly she could hear it in her ears. Another sound. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Moving across the foyer. Her eyes searched the room until she spotted a heavy brass candlestick resting on an old dresser. She grabbed it with both hands. Her breathing became shallow. "Who's there?" she called. No response. Only another deliberate step. Then another. Sophia forced herself toward the staircase. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but there was nowhere else to go. She reached the landing and looked down. A woman with silver hair stood calmly in the foyer, arranging grocery bags on a small wooden table as though she belonged there. She looked up without the slightest hint of surprise. "You must be Miss Bennett." Sophia lowered the candlestick only slightly. "Who are you?" "My name is Evelyn Harper." The older woman's posture was straight, her expression unreadable. "I cared for this house for more than 40 years. Sophia frowned. "The attorney never mentioned anyone else lived here. He rarely mentions anything beyond legal paperwork." Mrs. Harper folded her gloves with quiet precision. "Your great-aunt instructed me to continue maintaining the estate after her passing." "You knew Margaret Ashford." A faint smile touched the woman's face. "I knew her better than almost anyone." Sophia hesitated before asking the question that had haunted her since receiving the inheritance. Why would she leave all of this to someone she'd never even met? Mrs. Harper became very still. For several long seconds, she said nothing. Then she answered quietly. "Because sometimes, family watches over you, even from a distance." Before Sophia could ask another question, the older woman changed the subject. The refrigerator has been stocked. The electricity works, although not perfectly. And I've prepared the master bedroom." She turned towards the kitchen before stopping at the doorway. "Oh." She looked back over her shoulder. "One more thing. There is a room in this house your great-aunt never allowed anyone to enter." Sophia's curiosity immediately sharpened. "A locked room." Mrs. Harper slowly shook her head. "No." Her eyes drifted toward the far wall of the foyer. "A room that was never meant to be found?" That night, Sophia couldn't sleep. The old house groaned with every gust of wind. Somewhere inside the walls came soft, rhythmic knocks, almost like footsteps moving where no one should have been. Unable to ignore the feeling, she took her phone and switched on the flashlight. As she walked through the silent foyer, something caught her attention. Near the bottom of the staircase, behind peeling wallpaper, she noticed the faint outline of a narrow wooden door almost perfectly hidden within the wall. Her heartbeat quickened. Without realizing it, Sophia Bennett had just discovered the first secret Blackwood Manor had been waiting decades to reveal. Sophia barely slept that night. Every creak of the old mansion sounded like footsteps. Every whisper of the wind slipping through the cracked windows felt almost intentional. She kept thinking about Mrs. Harper's final words. A room that was never meant to be found. Morning sunlight finally pushed away the darkness, spilling through the tall stained glass windows and filling the foyer with warm, golden light. The house suddenly seemed less frightening, almost inviting, as if it had simply been waiting for daylight to reveal another side of itself. After a quick breakfast, Sophia found herself standing once again in front of the faded wallpaper near the staircase. The outline of the hidden door was impossible to ignore now. Taking a deep breath, she ran her fingers along the wooden frame until she felt a tiny metal latch hidden beneath loose wallpaper. Click! The narrow door slowly swung inward. A cool draft brushed against her face. Beyond it lay a small private study, untouched by time. Dust covered nearly every surface. Yet the room felt strangely preserved, as though someone had expected to return at any moment. Shelves lined every wall, packed with journals, leather-bound books, and neatly labeled document boxes. A mahogany writing desk faced a tall window draped with heavy velvet curtains. An antique armchair sat nearby. Everything was exactly where its owner had left it decades earlier. Sophia stepped inside carefully. "This was your sanctuary, wasn't it?" she whispered. As she pulled back the curtains, sunlight flooded the room. Tiny dust particles danced through the air like floating memories. Then her eyes landed on a silver picture frame resting on the desk. She gently wiped away years of dust. The moment she saw the photograph, her breath caught. The young woman smiling back at her looked almost identical. The same eyes, the same smile, the same delicate shape of her face. It was like staring into another version of herself. Her hands began to tremble. She carefully turned the frame over. Written in faded blue ink were just 4 words. Elizabeth Ashford Summer, 1965. "My mother," Sophia whispered. "I finally found you." For 37 years, she had lived with nothing more than a single sentence. "Your mother died giving birth to you." No photographs. No stories. No memories. Now, for the first time in her life, she was looking into her mother's eyes. Tears blurred her vision. She gently traced Elizabeth's smile with her fingertips. "You look so happy." For reasons she couldn't explain, the room suddenly felt alive, as though every journal, every photograph, every piece of furniture had been waiting patiently for this exact moment. The moment a daughter finally came home, just then, the sound of the front door opening echoed through the mansion. Mrs. Harper had returned. Sophia instinctively slipped the photograph into her sweater pocket before quietly closing the hidden door behind her. She found Mrs. Harper unpacking groceries in the kitchen. "I brought fresh vegetables," the older woman said without looking up. "And some homemade soup?" Sophia placed the photograph on the kitchen table. "I found this." Mrs. Harper froze. Only for a second. But Sophia noticed. "You went into the study. It wasn't locked." "No." Mrs. Harper answered softly. "It never was." Sophia searched the older woman's face. "You knew my mother." Mrs. Harper slowly nodded. "I watched her grow up. What was she like?" For the first time since they had met, Mrs. Harper smiled. "Fearless. Kind. Far too stubborn." Her smile faded, and willing to sacrifice everything for the people she loved. Sophia felt tears welling again. Why has no one ever told me about her? Mrs. Harper carefully placed a loaf of bread on the counter before answering. Because the truth was buried long before you were born. What truth? The older woman looked toward the kitchen window, as if weighing every word. Your mother fell in love with a man your family considered beneath their name. They tried to separate them. They failed. So they ran away together. Sophia listened without speaking. Everything she had believed about her family was beginning to crumble. My mother wasn't ashamed. Mrs. Harper looked directly into her eyes. No, she chose love over wealth. And she never regretted it. Those words settled deep inside Sophia's heart. For years she had blamed herself, believed she was simply an unwanted child left behind by tragedy. Now, she realized something completely different. She hadn't been abandoned. She had been protected. Someone had spent decades preserving every photograph, every letter, every memory, waiting until the day she was finally ready to discover them herself. That afternoon, Sophia returned alone to the hidden study. She sat in the old leather chair, holding her mother's photograph against her chest. The mansion no longer felt like an empty inheritance. It no longer felt like an unfamiliar house filled with strangers' belongings. For the first time, it felt like family. She gently rested one hand on her growing belly. I understand now, she whispered. I'm not here by accident. This house didn't save me. It brought me home. Outside, the wind moved softly through the ancient oak trees. Deep within the walls of Blackwood Manor, another secret still waited in silence. And somewhere inside those forgotten journals, the truth about Elizabeth Ashford's death and the danger that had followed her family for generations was only beginning to reveal itself. The following week changed something deep inside Sophia Bennett. She no longer woke up wondering how she would survive another day. Instead, she woke up wondering what secrets Blackwood Manor would reveal next. Each morning, Mrs. Evelyn Harper arrived carrying fresh bread, vegetables from her garden, and stories she never intended to tell but somehow always did. Little by little, the silence surrounding the Ashford family began to crack. They weren't just wealthy, Mrs. Harper said one afternoon while pruning roses outside the manor. They were responsible. Sophia looked up. What do you mean? Mrs. Harper smiled faintly. Half this town existed because of your family. She pointed toward the distant valley below. The school, the church, the old hospital, the public library. Every one of them stands because someone in your family believed success meant lifting other people up. Sophia looked across the land stretching beyond the mansion. Until now, she had only seen abandoned fields. Now, she began seeing history. A few days later, she drove into the nearby town of Ashwood to buy groceries. This time, the stares felt different. People weren't looking at her because she was a stranger anymore. They were looking because they remembered someone else. Inside Harper's Market, an elderly woman quietly approached her. You must be Elizabeth's daughter. Sophia smiled politely. I never had the chance to know her. The woman's eyes softened. Then let me tell you something. Your mother once drove 30 miles through a snowstorm just to deliver medicine to my little boy. She never accepted a penny. Another customer overheard the conversation. So that's who you are, he murmured. I still remember your great-aunt paying my father's hospital bills after the mill accident. Within minutes, complete strangers were sharing stories. One remembered a college scholarship. Another remembered groceries left anonymously on a front porch during hard times. Another recalled Margaret Ashford secretly helping local businesses survive a devastating recession decades earlier. None of them had known who their mysterious benefactor was. Until now, Sophia stood speechless. For years, she had believed she came from nothing. Now she realized she came from people who had quietly changed countless lives. That afternoon, she visited the Ashwood Historical Society, hoping to learn more about the family whose name she had only recently discovered. The building was small, but inside it held more than a century of local memories. Photographs, maps, newspaper archives. Waiting for her was Ethan Carter, the town's historian. Unlike everyone else, Ethan wasn't fascinated by the mansion. He was fascinated by the people who had lived there. "Most people think Blackwood Manor represents money," he said, as he carefully unfolded an old county map. "They're wrong." Sophia looked at him. "It represents responsibility." He pointed toward dozens of locations marked across the map. "Your family built schools. They funded orphanages. They preserved thousands of acres of forest instead of selling everything for profit." Then he looked directly at her. "Margaret Ashford wasn't protecting a house. She was protecting an idea." Those words lingered in Sophia's mind. An idea. Not wealth. Not power. Legacy. For the first time since arriving, she stopped asking herself why Margaret had chosen her. Instead, she began asking herself a different question. Was she worthy of becoming the next guardian of that legacy? As evening settled over Blackwood Manor, Sophia walked alone through the overgrown gardens. The setting sun painted the mansion in warm, golden light. The house no longer looked abandoned. It looked patient, as though it had waited decades for someone to finally come home. She rested both hands gently over her growing belly. "I think I understand now." The baby kicked, a soft reminder that she was no longer living only for herself. "I won't let this family disappear. I won't let their story end with me." For the first time since Daniel walked away. For the first time since losing her job. For the first time since standing homeless on a sidewalk with nothing but 2 suitcases, Sophia wasn't afraid anymore. She had found something far more valuable than an inheritance. She had found a purpose. But while hope was quietly taking root inside Blackwood Manor, someone else was watching. Far beyond the iron gates, a black SUV remained hidden beneath the trees. Inside, a man lowered a pair of binoculars. A slow smile spread across his face. "So?" he said quietly. "She's finally starting to understand." He slipped his phone from his pocket and made a call. "Move to phase 2. We're running out of time." Sophia Bennett had no idea that accepting her family's legacy had also made her the greatest obstacle standing between a ruthless empire and a fortune worth billions hidden beneath the land she now called home. Everything changed after Sophia Bennett learned the truth. She no longer saw herself as a woman rescued by an unexpected inheritance. She saw herself as the last person standing between her family's legacy and those determined to erase it forever. The frightened woman who had arrived at Blackwood Manor carrying 2 worn suitcases was slowly disappearing. In her place stood someone stronger, someone willing to fight. Every morning, Sophia devoted hours to exploring rooms she had ignored during her first days in the mansion. Hidden compartments, forgotten journals, old maps, and family records slowly revealed a history far richer and far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. One afternoon, while organizing stacks of legal documents inside the hidden study, she uncovered a weathered leather journal that had belonged to Margaret Ashford. Inside its pages were decades of handwritten notes. Not financial records, not business accounts, personal thoughts. On one page, a sentence had been underlined several times. "One day she will come home. She won't know why at first. But when the truth finds her, she'll know exactly what must be protected." Sophia stared at the words in silence. It felt as though Margaret had written them directly to her. A lump formed in her throat. For the first time in her life, someone had believed in her long before she even knew they existed. She gently closed the journal and looked around the study. "I'm here," she whispered. "And I finally understand." The next morning, she returned to Ashwood. This time, she wasn't there to buy groceries. She wanted answers. At the Historical Society, Ethan Carter was surprised to see her again. "I was hoping you'd come back." Sophia smiled. "I think I'm finally asking the right questions." For hours they studied old land records, newspaper archives, and property maps. Piece by piece, Ethan helped her understand how the Ashford family had quietly protected thousands of acres from developers for generations. "They could have become one of the richest families in the state," Ethan explained. But your great-aunt believed some things were worth more than money." Sophia nodded. "She wasn't protecting land." "No." Ethan smiled. "She was protecting people." Those words stayed with Sophia long after she left. Driving back to the manor, she passed forests, rivers, and rolling fields that had remained untouched for decades. For the first time, she didn't see property. She saw responsibility. That evening, Mrs. Harper found Sophia cleaning the neglected family cemetery hidden behind the old chapel. Broken headstones had been covered by weeds. Dead branches littered the pathways. Without saying a word, Mrs. Harper picked up another rake and began helping. For nearly an hour, neither woman spoke. Finally, Mrs. Harper broke the silence. "You've changed." Sophia looked up. "Have I? When you arrived..." Mrs. Harper smiled gently. "Yaskum, you were looking for somewhere to hide?" She rested both hands on the wooden handle of the rake. "Now you're looking for something worth defending." Sophia glanced toward the rows of weathered headstones. "I spent months believing I had lost everything. My marriage, my career, my future." She paused before continuing. "But maybe losing all of that was the only reason I was able to find this place." Mrs. Harper nodded slowly. "Sometimes life doesn't destroy our plans. It clears the road that was always meant for us." Sophia felt tears gathering in her eyes. For the first time since Daniel walked away, she no longer hated what had happened. Because every painful step, every rejection, every lonely night had led her here. Over the following days, Sophia made a decision. Blackwood Manor would never become another abandoned mansion, nor would it become another luxury development built for profit. It would become exactly what Margaret Ashford had always envisioned. A place where history, family, and community could continue to live together. She began making plans. The East Wing could become a museum honoring the town's history. The old library could welcome local students. The gardens could host charity events and community gatherings. Every idea made the house feel a little more alive, a little more like home. Standing on the front porch one evening, Sophia watched the sun disappear behind the hills. She gently rested both hands over her baby. "I know why we're here now." The baby answered with a gentle kick. She smiled through quiet tears. "We're not just starting a new life. We're finishing the one they started." Across the valley, hidden behind a line of trees, the same black SUV remained parked in silence. Its driver lowered a camera after photographing Sophia walking across the estate. He reached for his phone. "She isn't leaving," he said coldly. There was a brief pause before a voice answered. "Then stop trying to scare her." Another pause. The man's expression darkened. "It's time to remove the obstacle." Miles away, Sophia had no idea that while she was discovering the strength to protect her family's legacy, someone else had already decided that the only way to claim Blackwood Manor was to make sure its rightful heir never lived long enough to fight back. The storm arrived just after sunset. Dark clouds swallowed the sky above Blackwood Manor, and within minutes, rain poured over the estate with relentless force. Thunder shook the old mansion, and flashes of lightning illuminated the towering oak trees that had guarded the property for generations. Standing by the bedroom window, Sophia Bennett watched the rain race down the glass. For the first time since arriving at Blackwood Manor, she wasn't afraid of the storm. She was thinking about everything that had brought her here. Only a few months earlier, She had stood on a city sidewalk with nowhere to go, carrying 2 suitcases and a broken heart. She had lost her husband, lost her career, lost the future she thought she had carefully built. Back then, she believed her life was falling apart. Now she understood. It had actually been leading her home. A sudden pain swept across her abdomen. She instinctively placed a hand on her belly. The baby kicked. Then another contraction followed. Stronger this time. Mrs. Evelyn Harper hurried into the room. One look at Sophia's face telling her everything. "It's time," she said calmly. Outside, the roads had already flooded. The storm had cut off every route into town. There would be no ambulance, no hospital. The baby would be born here, inside Blackwood Manor, the same house where Sophia's family story had begun decades earlier. Mrs. Harper took charge with remarkable confidence. She prepared warm water, clean blankets, and every supply she had carefully stored away over the years. Meanwhile, Ethan Carter arrived just before the bridge became impassable. "I wasn't going to let you face this alone," he said, soaked from the rain. For hours, the storm raged outside while a different battle unfolded inside the old mansion. Each contraction grew stronger. Each breath demanded more courage than the last. There were moments when Sophia wanted to give up. "I can't," she whispered through tears. "I'm not strong enough." Mrs. Harper gently held her hand. "Yes, you are. You come from generations of women who refused to surrender." Ethan stood quietly nearby, offering encouragement whenever Sophia's strength began to fade. "You've survived everything life has thrown at you. This," he said softly, "isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning." The words gave her something to hold on to. One final push. Then, a baby's cry filled the room. For one breathtaking moment, everything became still. The storm, the fear, the loneliness, it all disappeared beneath the sound of new life. Mrs. Harper carefully wrapped the tiny baby girl in a warm blanket before placing her gently into Sophia's trembling arms. Tears streamed down Sophia's face as she looked into her daughter's eyes. "Hello," she whispered. "I've been waiting for you." The baby opened her tiny fingers, wrapping them around Sophia's hand. It was the smallest touch, yet somehow it healed wounds that had taken years to create. Sophia looked toward the rain-covered windows. "I finally understand why all of this happened. Not because life had been unfair, not because she had been abandoned, but because every painful chapter had been guiding her toward this moment, toward this child, toward this home, toward a family she never knew she had." The next morning, the storm had passed. Golden sunlight spilled across Blackwood Manor for the first time in days. The gardens glistened with fresh rain. Birds sang from the ancient oak trees. The mansion no longer felt haunted. It felt alive. Word spread quickly through Ashwood that Sophia and her baby were safe. Throughout the afternoon, neighbors arrived carrying flowers, homemade meals, baby blankets, and handwritten notes of congratulations. Some were people Sophia had only met once. Others had known her family decades earlier. Every visitor carried the same message. "Welcome home?" Standing on the front steps with her newborn daughter in her arms. Sophia looked across the valley that had belonged to her family for generations. She smiled, not because every problem had disappeared. Maxwell Pierce was still out there. The battle to protect Blackwood Manor was far from over. But something had changed. She was no longer fighting alone. She had found a family larger than blood, a community willing to stand beside her. And as she looked down at the little girl sleeping peacefully against her chest, Sophia made one final promise. "I'll protect everything they sacrificed for. I'll protect this home." And one day, she kissed her daughter's forehead. "On Sumsum, I'll tell you the incredible story of how it found us. Because sometimes, the greatest inheritance isn't a mansion or a fortune. It's discovering the courage to become the person your family always believed you could be. And for Sophia Bennett, that journey had only just begun. Sometimes it falls apart because it's making room for something far greater than you ever imagined. When Sophia Bennett lost her husband, her career, and the home she had spent years building, she believed she had reached the end of her story. Every closed door felt like proof that life had abandoned her. Every setback seemed unfair, and every tear made the future look darker. But looking back, she realized something extraordinary. If Daniel had never walked away, if she had never lost her job, if she had never been evicted, she would have never answered the phone that changed her life. She would have never discovered Blackwood Manor. She would have never learned the truth about her mother, her family, or the incredible legacy waiting for her. Most importantly, she would have never discovered the strength that had been inside her all along. The greatest battles we face often reveal the greatest version of ourselves. Pain has a way of stripping away everything that isn't real, leaving only what truly matters: our character, our courage, and the people we choose to protect. Sophia's journey reminds us that our past does not define our future. We cannot control betrayal, loss, or unexpected hardship. But we can choose how we respond to them. We can allow suffering to make us bitter, or we can let it make us stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. Every family carries a legacy. It may not be a grand mansion or hidden fortune. More often, it's the values we pass down, the sacrifices we make, and the love we leave behind for the next generation. In the end, Sophia inherited much more than Blackwood Manor. She inherited resilience. She inherited hope. She inherited the responsibility to protect something bigger than herself. And perhaps that's the most valuable inheritance any of us can ever receive: not wealth, but the courage to stand firm when life tests us, the strength to begin again after unimaginable loss, and the determination to leave the world a little better than we found it. Because one day, long after we're gone, people won't remember what we owned. They'll remember how we lived, how we loved, and the legacy we chose to leave behind.